Aboard the starship Elysium, suspended between galaxies, a unique rule governed interactions among its diverse inhabitants. Privacy was sacred, a directive as old as interstellar travel itself. Yet, despite this decree, a curious figure, a Virillian maid named Eliana, found herself irresistibly drawn to a forbidden act. Her charge, an enigmatic human named Jack, was oblivious to the silent conflict waged behind her large, luminescent eyes. Eliana belonged to a species renowned for their discretion and exceptional service. Virillians were employed across the cosmos primarily by those who could afford their impeccable standards. Their skin shimmered with a subtle glow, a characteristic that made them both striking and serene, soothing to those they served. With her slender form and delicate features, Eliana epitomized the elegance of her people. Jack, a rugged exobiologist in his early 30s, had joined the Elysium crew to study alien ecosystems. He was a man of science, his mind always chasing the next discovery. Jack's quarters, where Eliana was assigned, became a sanctuary of peculiar human artifacts and the occasional mess left by creative bursts. One evening, as Eliana performed her routine cleaning, the sound of water cascading in the bathroom paused her movements. Her species was naturally attuned to water, a scarce resource on her arid home planet. The sound drew her closer to the bathroom door, a boundary she had never crossed. Her heart throbbed in her chest, a drumbeat pushing her towards the unthinkable. Curiosity overcame her, and she found herself peering through the slightly ajar door. Steam swirled in the air, cloaking the room with a warm mist. Jack stood under the shower, water tracing the contours of his human form. The sight was startling, not just for the exposure of skin, but for the sheer vulnerability of it. Humans were so different, so fascinatingly soft compared to her own crystalline flesh. Eliana's breath caught in her throat as she watched. Jack's hands ran through his hair, then down his neck, each movement hypnotic. She knew the significance of this violation. Virillians valued the privacy of their employers above all else. Yet her eyes lingered, captivated by the simple act of a human cleansing himself. Guilt pricked at her conscience. She should look away, leave and forget this moment. But a part of her, a wild, untamed part, craved something indefinable. Something in the way he moved, so different from her people's graceful, calculated gestures. As Jack turned off the water and reached for his towel, Eliana swiftly retreated, her heart racing with fear and an unfamiliar longing. Back in the main room, she busied herself, trying to erase the memory of what she had seen. However, the image of Jack, so carefree and unaware, haunted her. Later that night, as she lay in her own quarters, a small, austere room afforded to all Virillian staff, Eliana wrestled with her feelings. She was torn between her duty and her burgeoning curiosity about Jack. The more she thought about him, the more she realized it wasn't just his appearance that intrigued her. It was his passion for his work, his unguarded laughter, his incessant questioning of the universe. But how could she reconcile these feelings with her role aboard the Elysium? How could she maintain the strict boundaries her position demanded when her heart longed to understand more of this human's world? As the ship hurtled through the void, its countless lights twinkling against the backdrop of space, Eliana felt a deep isolation. It was a feeling she had never anticipated, a longing for connection that transcended the rules of her engagement. It was a craving she knew she could no longer ignore. Eliana's restless night transitioned into a day charged with unspoken tension. She moved through her duties with her usual grace, but her mind was awash with vivid images of the previous evening. Her encounters with Jack were brief, yet each moment stretched endlessly as she navigated the tightrope between professionalism and the pull of her curiosity. Meanwhile, Jack, unaware of the silent storm brewing within Eliana, was preoccupied with his latest research findings. He had discovered a unique microbial life form on a recently explored planet, and his excitement was palpable. "Eliana, look at this," he called out, beckoning her closer to his digital microscope. Hesitantly, she approached, careful to keep her eyes on the screen and not on him. "What am I observing?" she inquired, her voice a melody of curiosity tempered with caution. "These microbes exhibit properties of both flora and fauna. It's remarkable. They adapt their metabolic processes in response to environmental changes instantaneously, Jack explained, his eyes alight with the thrill of discovery. Eliana peered into the microscope. The microbes danced under the gaze of the high-powered lens, shifting shapes and colors. It was a mesmerizing display, and for a moment she forgot her internal conflict. "Fascinating," she murmured. "Your species must be proud of such discoveries." Jack laughed, a sound that made Eliana's core flutter. "I guess so. We're just always looking to understand more, you know? It's not about pride. It's about curiosity." Curiosity. The word echoed in Eliana's mind. Wasn't it her own curiosity that had led her to this precarious situation? She took a step back, needing space to think, to breathe. As the day wore on, Eliana found herself watching Jack more often, observing not just his work but the man himself. She noticed how his forehead creased when he was focused, how he sipped his coffee absent-mindedly while lost in thought, and how his laughter seemed to fill the room with warmth. The proximity was becoming a torment. Each innocent interaction, each shared glance, was laced with an electric charge. It was a sensation Eliana hadn't known before, a mixture of exhilaration and dread. That evening, as she tidied up his quarters, Jack stood by the viewport, watching the stars streak by. "It never gets old, does it? The view," he said softly, almost to himself. Eliana joined him, standing a careful distance away. "It does not. Each star could be a home, a history, an entire saga." Jack turned to look at her, his gaze intense. "Do you ever think about going back? To your home?" The question caught her off guard. "Occasionally," she admitted. "But my duty is here now, with the crew, with the ship." "There's more for you out there, Eliana. Not just duty," Jack said, his voice low. The word struck a chord in Eliana. She looked away from him, back to the infinite space outside. Could there be a place in this vast universe where duty and desire coexisted? Where she could explore the depth of her feelings without fear of reprisal? The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswerable. Jack seemed to sense her turmoil, for he added, "Whatever you're thinking, you're not alone in it." Eliana felt the weight of his words, and a tentative hope began to blossom within her. Perhaps her fascination with Jack could be more than a solitary pursuit. Maybe, just maybe, it could be a path to understanding not only a different species but herself as well. As the night deepened, the ship sailed onward, its course as uncharted as Eliana's newfound feelings. The confines of duty still loomed large, but the possibilities that lay beyond them began to unfurl like the vastness of the galaxy itself. Eliana's resolve was tested the next day. Jack had invited her to assist with an experiment in the lab, a rare request. The lab was a sterile, brightly lit space, filled with advanced equipment that hummed softly. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, but Eliana's focus was split. She was hyper-aware of Jack's presence beside her, his proximity stirring emotions she struggled to suppress. "Today's experiment is crucial," Jack explained, his voice steady. "We're testing the reaction of these microbes to different environmental conditions. I could use your precision to help with the data collection." Eliana nodded, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as they began. The task was simple: observe, record, and adjust. Yet each time their hands brushed, a spark of electricity jolted through her. She kept her gaze on the screens, avoiding the intensity of his eyes. The hours passed in a blur of numbers and observations. As they worked, a comfortable silence settled between them, interrupted only by the occasional technical discussion. Eliana found herself slipping into the rhythm of their partnership, momentarily forgetting the inner turmoil that had plagued her. But then, as they completed the final phase of the experiment, Jack turned to her with a look that pierced through her defenses. "Eliana," he said softly, "I've noticed something different about you lately." Her breath caught. "Different?" she echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Jack continued, stepping closer. "You seem distant, yet there's something else. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it feels like there's more you want to say, more you're holding back." Eliana's pulse quickened. The words she had buried deep within her heart threatened to spill out, but fear kept them at bay. I don't know what you mean, she managed, her voice faltering. Jack didn't push, but the concern in his eyes deepened. I'm here if you need to talk, he said, his tone gentle. I'm not just your employer, Eliana. I'd like to think we're friends. The word friends lingered in the air, carrying with it a weight that Eliana wasn't prepared to bear. She nodded, but inside her thoughts churned with conflict. Friendship. Was that truly all she desired? Could she even allow herself to want more? The rest of the day passed in a haze. Eliana's duties felt mechanical, her mind elsewhere. By the time her shift ended, she was exhausted, not from the work but from the emotional battle raging within her. Later, in the quiet solitude of her quarters, Eliana stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying every interaction with Jack. His words echoed in her thoughts, mingling with her own desires. There was something undeniable between them, something that transcended the boundaries of their roles. In a moment of clarity, she realized that this wasn't just about curiosity or attraction, it was about connection, something she had never truly felt with anyone before. Jack saw her not just as a servant, but as an individual, with her own thoughts, feelings, and desires. That recognition was intoxicating, and it terrified her. Sleep eluded her as she wrestled with the implications. If she allowed herself to acknowledge these feelings, what would that mean for her, for them? The rules were clear, but her heart was no longer willing to follow them blindly. The ship's steady hum was the only sound in the darkness, a constant reminder of the world outside her small, isolated space. As the hours slipped away, Eliana made a decision, one that would change everything. She would confront her feelings, not just for her own sake, but because she owed it to herself to understand this strange, powerful connection she felt with Jack. Whatever the consequences, she knew she couldn't continue to live in denial. The truth, no matter how frightening, was the only path forward. And tomorrow, she would find the courage to face it. Eliana approached Jack the next day, her heart pounding in her chest. He was alone in the lab, reviewing data. She hesitated at the doorway, gathering the last remnants of her courage before stepping inside. "Jack, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. He looked up, surprised but attentive. "Of course, Eliana. What's on your mind?" She took a deep breath. "There's something I've been struggling with. Something I haven't been honest about." Jack's expression softened with concern. "You can tell me anything. I'm here to listen." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "I've crossed a line. I watched you when I shouldn't have. It was wrong, and I've been consumed by guilt, but also by something I don't fully understand." Jack's eyes widened slightly, but he remained calm. "When did this happen?" "That night in the shower," Eliana confessed, her voice trembling. "I saw you, and I couldn't look away. It wasn't just curiosity. I felt something I can't explain, something I've never felt before." Silence hung between them, thick and heavy. Jack's gaze searched hers, and she braced herself for anger, for disappointment. But instead, he simply asked, "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" Eliana struggled to find the right words. "I was afraid. Afraid of what it meant, of what you might think of me. I'm supposed to be professional, detached, but with you, it's different." Jack exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. "Eliana, I'm not angry. Surprised, yes, but not angry. We're both navigating something new here." Relief washed over her, though it was tempered by uncertainty. "I don't know what to do, Jack. I don't know how to handle these feelings." He stepped closer, his presence warm and reassuring. "Neither do I. But maybe we don't have to figure it all out right now. Maybe we can take it one step at a time." Eliana looked up at him, hope flickering in her chest. "Do you really think that's possible?" "I think it's worth trying," Jack said softly. "We're both more than just our roles here. If there's something real between us, we should explore it, carefully, together. The tension in the room shifted, no longer sharp with fear but softened by possibility. Eliana nodded, her heart lighter than it had been in days. Together, she echoed, the word a promise. For the first time since this all began, she felt a sense of calm. Whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. The next few days passed in a delicate balance. Eliana and Jack continued their work together, but there was an unspoken understanding between them now, a shared awareness that tinged every interaction. The boundaries they had once adhered to so strictly were now fluid, shaped by mutual curiosity and a quiet, growing affection. In the lab, their conversations drifted from professional topics to more personal ones. Jack spoke of his home on Earth, of the places he missed and the people he left behind. Eliana listened, absorbing every detail, her understanding of him deepening with each story. In return, she shared fragments of her own past, memories of her distant planet, of the crystalline forests she once wandered, of the customs and traditions that shaped her. One evening, after a particularly long day of experiments, they found themselves in the ship's observation deck. The room was dark, illuminated only by the soft glow of the stars outside. Jack leaned against the railing, gazing out into the vastness of space. "It's strange," he said quietly, "how we're out here, so far from everything familiar, and yet this feels right, being here with you." Eliana stood beside him, the closeness between them now a comfort rather than a source of tension. "I've felt that too," she admitted. "It's as if this place, this moment, was meant to be, despite everything." Jack turned to her, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "Eliana, I don't want to hide how I feel anymore. I care about you, more than just as a colleague or a friend." Her breath caught, the confession hanging between them like a fragile thread. "I care about you too, Jack," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "But I'm still afraid of what this means, what it could lead to." He reached out, gently taking her hand. "We don't have to rush. We can take this one step at a time, like we said. But I don't want to lose what we have. I don't want to lose you." Eliana squeezed his hand, the warmth of his touch grounding her. "You won't lose me, Jack. I'm here, and I want to see where this goes, whatever it might be." They stood there, hand in hand, the infinite expanse of the universe stretching out before them. For a moment, all the fears, the doubts, the uncertainties melted away, leaving only the connection between them, a connection that felt as vast and enduring as the stars themselves. In that quiet, shared space, they found a new beginning, one that neither had anticipated, but both were now eager to explore. The future remained uncertain, but together they were ready to face whatever came next. The days that followed were filled with a new rhythm, one that Eliana and Jack created together. Their work continued, but now there was an undercurrent of anticipation, a shared secret that colored everything they did. The tension that once felt overwhelming had transformed into something deeper, an unspoken bond that both thrilled and soothed them. They spent more time together, often finding excuses to meet outside of their duties. Whether it was a shared meal in the mess hall, quiet moments in the observation deck, or even just passing each other in the corridors, each encounter brought them closer. They talked late into the night, exploring the contours of their thoughts and feelings, learning to navigate the delicate balance between their roles and their growing affection. But as the connection between them deepened, so did the awareness of the risks they were taking. The ship's regulations were clear, and the consequences for breaching them could be severe. Eliana, in particular, struggled with the weight of her responsibilities, the expectations placed upon her by her people. She had always been the perfect Varillian maid, discreet, efficient, and entirely professional. But now she was something more, something that defied the strictures of her role. One evening, as they sat together in the observation deck, Jack broached the subject that had been on both their minds. "Eliana, We need to talk about what this means. About us. She nodded, knowing the conversation was inevitable. I've been thinking about it too. We can't ignore the reality of our situation. Jack's brow furrowed as he considered his words. I don't want to put you in a difficult position. If this is too much, if it's too risky, we can... Eliana cut him off gently, placing her hand on his. No, Jack. This is what I want. But we need to be careful. To find a way to make this work without compromising everything we've built. He looked at her, his expression a mix of concern and determination. We could be discreet, keep things between us. But even then, we're still taking a risk. I don't want to do anything that could hurt you or jeopardize your place here. Eliana's heart ached at his words, at the sincerity in his voice. She knew he was right. They were walking a fine line. But she also knew that what they had was worth fighting for. I'm willing to take that risk, Jack. We can find a way to make this work, to be together without losing who we are. Jack squeezed her hand, his resolve hardening. Then we do it together. We'll be careful, but we won't hide from each other. We'll find a balance. Their agreement was unspoken but clear. They would continue as they were, mindful of the boundaries but unwilling to let go of what they had found in each other. It was a fragile arrangement, one built on trust and a shared commitment to navigate the complexities of their situation. The following weeks passed in a blur of cautious affection. They continued their work, side by side, while nurturing the connection that had grown between them. Every glance, every touch, was a promise of more, a promise of a future they were slowly carving out, piece by piece. One night, as they stood together in the observation deck, watching the stars pass by, Jack turned to Eliana with a rare smile. We've come a long way, haven't we? She smiled back, the warmth of his presence filling her with a quiet joy. Yes, we have, and there's still so much more to explore. Jack nodded, pulling her closer. Whatever happens, whatever challenges we face, we'll face them together. Eliana leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against hers. Together, she echoed, the word a vow as strong as any they could make. As the stars continued their endless dance across the sky, Eliana and Jack stood united, ready to face whatever the universe had in store for them. In that moment, they knew that no matter where their path led, they had already found something extraordinary, a connection that transcended the boundaries of duty and species, a love that was as vast and infinite as the cosmos itself.